Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
I'm honored to have you take a few minutes of your day to join me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. I'm having very similar calls with quite a few of my clients and then some others in the industry that sometimes reach out and ask for my thoughts every once in a while. It's around what we're seeing, I'll call it the hollowing out of our annual giving programs. Whether it is social service, where I have a client or two that I work with, education, both at the higher educational level as well as at the secondary, more independent schools level, healthcare, I'm having very, very, very consistent conversations. People asking, we're doing the same general things that we've done in the past when it comes to mailings, digital, paper. And what's happening is that we're watching a hollowing out, no responses or so few responses. And today I want to talk a little bit about this phenomenon. And I am not the world's greatest content expert, but I've had to kind of dive into this a little bit differently. And what I want to really try to address is the idea of behavioral economics. That maybe we have to get more sophisticated with the way in which we're approaching our mass donor opportunities in more of a for-profit manner. And in doing so, we're going to look at data, we're going to look at better designs, we're going to look at the science behind why people might be willing to engage, and really give you 8 practical things to think about in how you communicate and provide people the options. Why are we in this situation? Well, the first thing is that fewer people are being philanthropic. We're back to one of the premises that I deal with quite often. The latest numbers, if you want the kind of the rationale, what we call the generosity crisis, read Nathan Chappell's book, The Generosity Crisis. It's where the name comes from, where we're now below 46% of the households in the United States making a gift, which means when we get somebody, we've got to do a much better job on stewardship and engaging, and then finding the right way in which to reapproach them in terms of the next possible gift. At the same time, we have some economic as well as just communication challenges. I truly believe that economically, there are more people out there struggling with their disposable income decisions than we might actually realize and what the economic statistics tell us. This is more anecdotal, but I see lots of things, and in fact, so many that my wife and I tend to say, hey, look at that particular scenario. And it's just an individual small circumstance, but we're kind of like, I wonder, because those are the disposable dollars that people utilize to live their life, that all of a sudden they don't have as much of that. I think this is really more of an issue than we realize. I think there's also a communications overload, whether it's by mail or by digital, email, text, QR codes, things of that nature. I do believe that this overload is leading to kind of an inertia of what I would call paralyzation, that it's just easier not to answer to anything than it is to try to sift through all of the communication coming our way. I would use as an example, and this is maybe just my example, but the Giving Tuesday, and there's a very large swaths of different ways of doing this, but the concept of a giving day, and literally every week in my email box, whether it's the law school, organizations I've given to before, things that I've done or been involved with, there are a constant barrage of, hey, we're having a giving day and we've got a matching gift. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm just trying to get through my day, and I can't be much different than most people. Which is why the way in which we do this has to be done, I think, more effectively, and why we get into this idea of behavioral economics. Again, I'm not an expert at annual giving, but in my educational life, I have studied behavioral economics because it's used as a for-profit decision-making process to get people to engage, either purchasing in the store or online, where we look at tools to create less friction into the decision-making. And so I want to give you 5 different terms for you to think about, and then we're going to get into the tactical. What are 8 things that you can do to think about how you reframe this conversation or these solicitations to re-engage? So behavioral economics deals with a lot of different concepts, but it's about, as mentioned, this reduction of friction. And to do so, we have terms that we use. So things like nudges, which are subtle cues that give kind of a preferred action, an easier path to completion. And so we're trying to nudge people, as it sounds, by making it easier to complete what they're wanting or hopefully wanting to do. Then there's default options where we don't give people as many choices except the choices we want them to take. The default is we want you to do this. And you'd be surprised from a behavioral economics perspective how many people just say, well, I'll do what I did last time or I'll do the default, even if they haven't done it before. The third is what's called loss aversion, and this is where we make people feel the loss more strongly than the actual gain. It's like a fear of losing something or losing the connection, that motivator that moves us. And so this loss actually propels us to do what hopefully we're going to talk about the nonprofit wants you to do, which is to give. The fourth is what they call social proofing or social proof, where they're tying what they want you to do to other people you might respect, testimonials, participation counts, things of that nature, so that you feel as if you're not involved, there is a negative social impact. Or if you want to look at it more positively, which I tend to do, when I'm involved, I'm part of this group or I'm part of this identity. The last is what's called framing. And this is how information is presented that might change the perception of what's being asked. And a way to think about this is joining others to keep this, our particular nonprofit, or maybe the industry that we're in, alive or robust. And instead of asking for money, we're actually asking them to join in the larger pursuit of what we all want, which is, if we use healthcare as an example, education as an example, so people to be fed, healthcare for all, educational opportunities for the next generation of leaders. We're recasting it or reframing it in a much potentially larger perspective. So nudging, default options, loss aversion, social proofing, and framing are all concepts that lead into this behavioral economic tactical discussion. And as we try to do each week here on Around with Randall, give you some tactical solutions that might be of assistance to you. What can you do today? Particularly as maybe many of you are thinking about the end of the year process of asking, but you could use this at any time. So let's jump into the tactical. 8 different things you can think about. Number one is, as you heard kind of in the beginning, is this idea of the default reoccurring option. What behavioral science teaches is that people will do the default more often than what you might realize. Not because it's best, but because it really requires no effort. I don't have to think about it. I'll do that. They told me to do that. And so this is where we lead in our solicitations with the default option, that it's almost as if we're saying everybody's doing this. And so we could make it monthly giving or automatic renewals. And this is, when we talk about automatic renewals, something I find to be somewhat challenging on the for-profit side, where I'm always using one of my 2, but it's usually the Outlook task list or to-do list, to make sure that I don't get hammered with automatic renewals. For-profit companies have figured this out in an incredible way. They don't even give you that option. They just say it's assumed you're going to automatically renew, and as a result, what's going to happen is you have to decide to pull yourself out of it. So, would you like to make this a recurring gift? Would you like to find a way to make this a monthly recurring gift? To give you a sense of how powerful this is, when they've looked at behavioral studies through various ideas of what they think of as the nudge, meaning we're going to give you this as our subtle cue that this is the preferred option. There's a book written called The Nudge that they found that 20 to 40% increases when you use the default in the right way. So really what we're talking about is to pair the default at the top with really donor-friendly language. And you probably want to add, because we want to be good stewards of the relationships we build, you can say you can change or stop at any time. But It's not quite pushy, but it is creating the least resistant way to maximize someone's engagement. So in this process, the nudge, using a default. Number two is the idea of social norms, leveraging this idea of connection, that people take their cues from others when they're uncertain. If someone's locked into your organization, then you know that they're going to give. But at the end of the day, what we've got to figure out is that we have an opportunity to create a connection beyond just our organization, particularly for those that aren't as locked in. So you could do things like join 1,200 alumni who've already given. So if they feel as if they haven't, or maybe it's an employee campaign. 95% of our employees have given, and we would love for you to join this effort. Why this works is that social proofing reduces the idea of the anxiety that they are isolated or that might strengthen their community connection. You have to be cautious, though. If you overuse this, you lose credibility. Or if you try to stretch the truth too much, you end up in a situation where if somebody catches you, it really diminishes your trust. So make sure that it's quantitatively accurate. Numbers matter. Number two, the social norms or the social proofing. The third is framing appeals around loss diversion. It's amazing that people are more motivated to avoid loss than they are to achieve gain. So this is not about creating a negative, but turning it around that the loss, if people aren't involved, are the opportunities that your nonprofit provides. An example. So what happens if, and we've done this, let's say time in memoriam, where you say your gift will help 10 students, your gift of $100 will help 10 students attend a camp. Doesn't make a difference. Well, what happens if we pivoted it and made it, and this is where the idea of behavioral economics comes in, we're asking for the same thing, but we change the language. Without your support, 10 students may lose their chance to attend camp. Just in me saying it, it's kind of freaky how I feel like, well, I don't want someone to lose out. I want them to get what they've gotten before. And so you're repositioning this as the loss triggering a stronger emotion in someone, but it's not their loss, it's your loss or the people that you're helping. Feeding people, helping people with their healthcare challenges, providing scholarship. You can spin this in so many different ways. The real conundrum here, or something to be aware of, is that you have to balance this. Because if you make the loss so urgent or so large that it's just insurmountable, well, people will look at that and go, well, I'm not going to give that because I can't really help. So you're going to have to probably segment this kind of conversation around the different levels of giving and connect it to things that your organization does. Without your help, our students, our recipients, are the food we provide, scholarships, but your gift restores their hope, their opportunities. Loss aversion has a powerful impact on decision making, but we have to be a little bit careful that we don't overuse it or make it too big where we seem like what we're trying to accomplish isn't possible. So loss aversion, number 3. Number 4 is simplifying the choice that people have. That I'm seeing this more and more, and you can tell the really professional mailings, and I look at all of them at home, don't respond to all of them, but I'm always looking. The really professional ones are only providing 3 or 4 options to choose from. So you could use the default at the top. You could use an automatic requalifier. There's a lot of different ways in which you can use this, but if you're more than 4, then chances are it becomes too complicated. I recently went through this with my mother when she was trying to do something nice for some people, and she got online and she just got overwhelmed. And I know why, because there were like 9 choices. She's like, I don't know. I just wanted, It just was more than she wanted to deal with. Simplified options reduce the idea of what's thought of in behavioral science as cognitive load, meaning people have to think too much. And it actually speeds up the decision making when we have fewer things. So you might have giving levels of $50 for supplies for student in 1 week, $250 for the classroom technology for the month, $1,000 for a full scholarship, $5,000 to buy a big piece of equipment for the students in their use. Keep it simple and keep the ranges actually somewhat separated. Now, maybe 50 to 250 in my example may be too much. Maybe you want a 100 or 150. But if you have 25, 50, 75, 100, it doesn't get you to the higher levels of options when you use this idea of simplifying choice. So the more complex you make the choices, the less likely they are to give because of what's thought of as cognitive load. Number 5 is highlighting the immediacy or the tangible impact, which we've talked about a number of times throughout, in different ways, throughout the different podcasts, that just asking for dollars is less impactful than seeing visible results. Not abstract, not distant, but what it means to someone now. Your gift of today of $25 will provide 5 meals for people who come into our food kitchen this week. Or a donation possibly before midnight with the match that we have will allow students to attend a class trip, or it could be provide scholarships or provide books or whatever the things that you are. This is going to require you to break down some spending, meaning, and we've talked about this in various episodes about going to your CFO or finance team and asking, tell us how much something costs so we can spin it. But that immediacy can't be for next year. It's got to be for now. The reason this works is that people's emotional connection, satisfaction, are more elevated when we have immediate need, or when the result when they look at it from their standpoint is sooner. And so follow-up in real time then also becomes important. Not only if someone makes that $25 gift to provide 5 meals, it's being able then to steward them almost instantaneously to say, I'm going to show you a picture of the 5 meals you provided. Or because of you, these 5 meals were provided this week or yesterday and today. It's shortening that feedback loop with that sense of immediacy because that's how they chose to give. So you're matching stewardship to solicitation. This is a wonderful way of elevating instant connection. Number 6 is making a sense of personalization with what's thought of as called behavioral cues. So this is really important when it's linked to past behavior. Our repeat donors, our Libunts and Sibunts. Connecting them in a way that allows them to elevate their own personal behavior. You've been a part of this mission for 5 years. Would you consider deepening it with your gift of this year by increasing it by 10%? As someone who's provided scholarship support before, did you know that your difference is not just in totality, but individually for a particular student? The reason this works is it builds upon something that is their identity. They've done this before. And this is exactly why, and you always see it in the chat rooms, and I've gotten to the point I don't even respond anymore, why memorial gifts don't work, or the idea of trying to keep them. Because they didn't give to you, but they did give to you. They gave to someone else. And so a recognition gift, if someone's recognizing someone who works there, still there, that's one thing. But how do we keep our memorial? Well, you can't, because their behavioral cues, their identity was with someone else, and it was a memorial gift to the organization that they chose. But this is where we lose our Libunts and Sibunts. This is where we can turn to get them back. Because if we were to talk about their behavior, in the past you've given, we missed you last year. Would you consider this kind of a micro recognition of you're amongst some of our longest standing donors? We don't want to lose you. This is your 3rd year of doing this. These small affirmations help create that loyalty. And behavioral economics says is that once people give, this is about planned giving as well. Once someone's in their estate or a nonprofit's in an estate, they tend not to come out. That's a behavioral cue or behavioral connection. How do we use that? Which means greater levels of segmentation, more letters with a different variety of letters, or emails outreach that individualizes more of the solicitation. Behavioral cues. Number 7 is the idea of commitment and consistency. What we know is people tend to do the same thing over and over. And when they feel good about it, what this is you're inviting donors to affirm this connection, this consistency of their past. You could say something like, as someone who believes in the openness of education, the hope of education, your continued support changes lives. If you know me or have heard me speak before, I tend to talk about familial circumstances. And I tell the story of that many years ago, my sisters and I started a scholarship fund in my parents' name. And my parents were, for their 40th wedding anniversary, they were alive. They've given to it. Now mom giving to it. But for mom, it's interesting to watch. I did it to honor them because they valued education so much and provided us with that opportunity as their children. But for mom, it's more than that. Mom talks about the fact that the reason she feels so good about it is because we've been given so much. She wants other people to be given that same opportunity, that commitment and consistency. And so when she's most passionate is when they advocate and that connect to her past, this idea of the consistency of what she believes. And I don't think they've figured it out that much, to be candid, but I've watched it. And so you show this commitment by this long-standing identity-based giving pattern. Now, this requires some stewardship. If someone just writes you a $5,000 check, $500 check, $100 check, and there's no ability to figure out why they give, we can't use this one, which makes stewardship, thank you calls, outreach. Have a client I'm working with, really kind of an amazing thing that the particular gift officer's doing. She's spending every half an hour, every afternoon for half an hour to an hour, depending on how much time she has, just making thank you calls. And what we've worked into this is exactly what we're talking about it here. Why'd you choose to give? Well, that becomes a note in the CRM that allows them to ask for, as we've discussed, that consistency. The last is kind of a catch-all, but it's creating small positive friction moments to reinforce value. So sometimes friction isn't all that bad. We talked about it at the beginning about creating ease in doing this. But I also believe, and I tell my clients this all the time, one of my greatest joys is creating an idea of fiction, of creating discomfort, because we don't tend to change what we do until there's a little friction. Now, not a lot, we don't have to be painful, but small pauses in this case can increase perceived meaning. So are you providing particularly long-standing donors an opportunity to reflect, to write back to you and tell you why, to find a way for there to be a dedication, or to take someone's $100 general donation and figure out how they can make it something more specific in an area that you need support? What you're doing is you're causing them to think. Now, you can't go overboard because we want annual giving to be somewhat easy, but there is a way to make it workable. And maybe it's something as easy as, would you like to dedicate your donation now or into the future to a specific area or specific person or specific reason? All of these aid in the behavioral sciences, behavioral economics. If you think about it in these ways, and maybe it's too late for this year at the end of the year, but you might change how you do your annual giving process. If you're sending out one letter to everybody, that is not going to work anymore. Behavioral economics is teaching us that we should think about this differently to maximize the opportunity to connect to the donor where they are, giving them 8 different things we talked about today, opportunities to engage at a much higher level. And in doing so, maybe this is one tool to keep and increase our annual giving platforms. And as I've said, they're decreasing, which means we need to become better at what we do. Sophistication, the thought process, getting out ahead of it, not waiting for the last minute to find ways of increasing connection with those who support our nonprofits. Don't forget to check out the blogs, 2 per week, 90-second reads, hallettphilanthropy.com/blogs. You can do an RSS feed right to you. It'll come out to you when it comes out, Tuesday, Thursdays. And if you'd like to, you can reach out to me at podcast@hallettphilanthropy.com. I sense a sense of inconsistency, unevenness, kind of a process of feeling discontent a little bit amongst people I'm dealing with, because it's getting harder to do what we do. We are a profession. So let me reiterate what I try to every week. The best people I work with, the best people I know, the best in this profession build deeper, more meaningful relationships. They make phone calls, they go see people, and they're talking to them about their passion and their connection without actually asking them for anything, to make it more about the relationship than the dollars. And in doing so, what we find is that that's the kind of behavior from our standpoint that fits into the category that I love the most. What I always say, some people make things happen by reaching out and building those relationships and buying into your nonprofit's mission and building those relationships with the people in the community who want to make a difference. $100, $100 million. You are someone who is making things happen, seeking others just like you. And to complete the old Gaelic phrase, some people watch things happen, then there are those who wondered what happened. We do what we do for the people and the places and the things in our community that are wondering what happened, that need help. That's a worthy cause. It's not easy. It's not meant to be. But as we professionalize who we are, we're going to make progress if we continue to make ourselves feel a little uncomfortable and getting out and talking to people, either on the phone, stewarding them, making them feel whole, not just always asking them for money. And if possible, having individual face-to-face conversations. Today, we talked about behavioral sciences and economics through the idea of donor behavior, is that it's irrational, but these nudges and these defaults and the framings may help you build those deeper relationships. And then you are someone who's making things happen. And that's a great way to spend every professional day. I'll look forward to seeing you the next time, right back here on the next edition of Around with Randall. Don't forget, make it a great day.